everybody, it is Jason Blaha here, and for your viewing pleasure, I have Alex Viada. If you don't know who he is you are the owner, right, of Complete
Yes.
Human Performance? He is the owner of Complete Human Performance. He did his undergraduate in biology and biochemistry and is working on his graduate degree in biomechanics. He is an elite level powerlifter who also competes in triathlons and super marathons. So this is a guy who can basically deadlift 700 pounds and then go run 30 miles the next day. And he specializes in working with athletes, and many of whom who are cross-training in these different disciplines. And so I think a lot of you have asked me, how does someone do this? And to get some basics from him on how the body can adapt to this, because for a lot of people, it seems counterintuitive that you can train for strength or size and endurance and be really good at both at the same time. So if you'd like to talk about that for a little bit, Alex.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot of this, first off, things didn't always go that well. I come primarily from a strength training background. For a number of years, I only powerlifted, had no taste for cardio whatsoever. Absolutely loathed it. I think there's a lot of people who understand that.
I clicked to that one. That's why I get on my Xbox when I'm on my bike.
Yeah, that enough is exhausting, right? Yeah, no, and I think when I first started incorporating a lot of cardiovascular training, I think I did everything wrong. One of the things I tried to do was simply say, okay, I approached cardio the way that a lot of people first approach lifting. They say, you know what, I'm just going to go out there, I'm just going to run. I'm just going to run a little bit every day, and things are going to get better, and da-da-da-da-da. And, in the first few years there, I had pretty much every injury known to man. And, I lost strength, I lost size, everything that people fear when they start trying to do everything together. And what I realized at that time was that I was approaching strength training intelligently. I've been using a conjugate or complex parallel concurrent periodization, loosely based off wet size method, whatever you want to refer to that as, for a number of years, and making sure that I'm working all the different facets of strength, explosive strength, maximum effort strength, hypertrophy, all those components. It wasn't until I started learning a bit more about endurance training and really breaking down those components of it and learning how to intelligently incorporate that with the strength training to allow for recovery that things really started to come together. And that's really been a big part of how this whole approach has come together, is saying, okay, we can break down strength training. We can break down the squat, the bench press, every aspect of strength performance, and break down the individual movements and look at the athlete and say, okay, what are the critical, essential components of training here? What is, people do a lot of useless accessory work. They do a lot of.
We're all guilty of that.
Absolutely. And people do the same thing for endurance training. You ever heard the term junk miles?
Right.
Where people they just go out and run 4 miles.
I started with running before I got into lifting.
Exactly. So those workouts where you're not going out there to get faster. You're not going out there to improve your endurance. You're just going out to do it. And you say, what?
Yeah, all you did was burn some calories, really.
Exactly. And, I think we're all guilty of that in lifting as well. My approach has always been, when you walk into the gym or when you walk out on the trail or anything else, have your objective. And I think this, is my bench press, am I going to work on form today? Am I going to work on explosion off the chest? Am I going to work on even tricep size? Some discernible purpose. And the same for endurance training. Every time you go out there, you schedule any sort of cardiovascular conditioning in your routine. You say, what is my objective from this particular workout? And what are the critical essential points? And what's all the garbage I can just get rid of and simply remove? And
we have to do that, because I think, again, we get away with that if we're training in just one discipline. We can get away with the extra garbage. But if you're training in multiple ones, your recovery is going to take a hit. Your ability to adapt is going to take a hit if you're adding an extra 4 hours or 5 hours of training every week. It's not helping either goal.
Right, absolutely.
It's a problem.
So I think then when I started breaking things down, a lot of coaches say, well, you've heard of the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, 80-20 rule. I've used that term myself before in videos.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people think it's the coach's job to help dial in that, assuming the athlete knows what effort gets them 80% of the results, they say it's the coach's job to bring in that extra 20%. That's not the 80-20 rule. But yeah, that component of it. The 20% of the effort that the athlete is putting in to get them 80% of the results, like they assume that's what the athlete has. My job is actually to help the athlete figure out, okay, what is that 80% that you should be doing? Because if you're doing 3 different disciplines, you say, what what is actually getting you those results. Let's look at your routine. Let's chop out all the garbage. Let's look at what you want to achieve with your cardiovascular condition. Let's cut out all the garbage. What is that essential core you should be doing? Because if they say, you can, with minimal effort in the strength training, you can get 80% of the results. With minimal effort in the endurance training, you can get 80% of the results. You're still doing less work than your body is capable of handling, but you're doing very well in both.
Right.
And by breaking that down, by saying, okay, now we've got this, now we've got you improving on both sides of things, now we can start thinking about what it takes to get to the next step.
Right. Because you're well below your recovery ability. The body can handle that. You're progressing in both, and then you have to figure out, well, where do I want to prioritize? What do I want to do with the rest of that recovery ability? Where do I want to apply it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I think one of the things that, I frequently come across is there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, of what it actually means to go out and to train for both. I think there's a lot of issues with the science. A lot of people talk about different pathways operating at cross purposes, and it's if you
That's
are
where we got CrossFit from.
Hey, that actually makes sense. I never thought of that.
And I love some of the CrossFit guys. I love some of the people. My aunt's big into CrossFit. She competed in the CrossFit Games this year in her 60s. She does 250.
Yeah.
63-year-old woman, but
impressive.
They get into that. They always want to cross-train everything rather than, which is the exact opposite of the approach you're discussing, because they're talking about these different pathways can hit all this stuff, and it's just not the most efficient way to go about it. I appreciate they're getting people off the couch.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely do that, because that is being sedentary and obese and out of shape is a problem in our culture, but I'm not sure if it's the best way to go.
Well, it's funny because a lot of individuals I work with are CrossFitters who precisely want to improve their base aerobic capacity and their base strength in the off season. I think they realize that. I keep telling them CrossFit is absolutely a sport. You have to approach it as one. Yeah. You don't get better at a sport just by playing the sport over and over and over again. You get better at a sport by breaking down the elements of that sport and improving each aspect separately.
Right.
And again, nothing bad to say about a lot of these guys because they are extremely hard workers.
Yeah.
You can throw the most.
I mean, give my aunt that. I mean, she's 63 and she's training 5 days a week in her 60s, and it's 250 pounds.
I mean, look, any athlete that sees collapsing on the floor after their workout is the objective, you can throw a lot of work at them and they'll do it.
True. I mean, they've got a lot of work capacity. That's something we have to give the CrossFit. They have definitely built up work capacity.
Absolutely.
They're not always making the best choice with how to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
They have work capacity.
Yeah. Well, and again, that kind of goes back to, so when you talk about going back to work capacity and recovery capacity a little bit, I think it's amazing how the human body adapts to these things. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have is there's very much an instant gratification component to training and the way people approach it. They think, if I have 2 bad weeks of workouts, something is dramatically wrong, and that could be the case. But, any time an athlete takes on a new training program, there's going to be a couple of weeks where their body's still adjusting. They're still adjusting their caloric intake. They're realizing how much more sleep and recovery they may need. So, a lot of these guys who are used to making progress week after week, or when they get on a new program and immediately want to see progress, they'll start to throw in runs or some sort of long-distance base building. They won't have adjusted the calories for it. They're going to be sore the next day. They're going to see a performance dip. And a lot of times they panic, and rather than saying, "Okay, let's trust this system. Let's understand that the body is not this fragile system that's going to fall apart the minute we ask it to do anything extra."
Right.
They've just got the guys that stick it through and give it another 2 or 3 weeks and slowly start to let their body adapt. That's when the progress starts to happen. And there's very much instant gratification when it comes to any new program. They say, "I'm a new program. Yeah, I should be breaking through my old PRs and everything should be going up." And it doesn't work.
It's more of a case when you're dealing with younger athletes or less experienced athletes. If you've been in the game more than about 5 or 10 years, you realize these things.
Yeah.
People who are starting out, somebody's been training for 2 years, 3 years, and they're spoken for just training in general. That is, they always expect that.
Yeah.
They do. They want that instant gratification. They don't realize that only works that way early on as a novice. After that, it's like you said, any new program, you're going to go through an adaptation process.
Well,
adjusting your food intake. I ran into that with a lot of guys. I had a lot of guys who were going for body part splits who went over to the novice program I put out, and a bunch of them were like, "I lost weight in the first 2 weeks," and And they're like, could I really be burning that much more calories weightlifting? I go, well, yeah, you were doing a body part split and you're squatting 3 times a week now.
Yeah.
Doing 5 sets of squats every time you walk in the gym. And they're like, but I lost 3 pounds.
That's
take up, and then they start making gains.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, I always think back to, there have actually been a couple people who've written about this. You take a guy like Paul Carter, his approach, don't max in the gym. Don't go for PRs in the gym. Don't do 1 rep maxes. I think there's a lot to be said for the approach of the gym and out in training is not where you're supposed to be performing your best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I work with a lot of guys who they may not necessarily hit new PRs in their training week to week. That's because as you up your bodies, as you up the work it's doing and start pressing its recovery a little bit, it's not always going to be performing optimally, but that doesn't mean it can't be training optimally.
Right, absolutely.
So you see a lot of these cases.
My lifts are all going up, but I'm doing mostly 4 to 6 reps myself, and I'm hitting PRs in that, and I know that will translate into 1 rep maxes over time.
Exactly. So then on competition day, when all is said and done, when your routine finally comes together, you'll suddenly say, okay, let's back off for a couple of days, taper for a couple of days, everything shoots up. And it's the same thing with any routine that's demanding a lot of your body. And I think you probably experienced this, and any professional or even high school track athlete has experienced this, where they go faster after a 3-day taper than they do normally in practice, and that's the goal. You never want your best training to be in the gym. You want it to be when it counts.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you'll see that with athletes who don't, they push themselves too hard and they're trying to hit those PRs in any sport, and then they burn themselves out right before a competition. They don't peak correctly.
Exactly.
At their actual competitive event, they're performing 5% less than they were a month out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and that's something else. I mean, I think that's one of the things that steers people away from a lot of these hybrid type approaches is, again, they're not just lifting, they're not just running. Suddenly they really are taxing what their body is capable of. And a lot of people aren't used to that.
No, people are scared they're going to overtrain lifting 4 days a week.
Exactly. You look at...
They're suddenly training 15 hours a week, combining the endurance with the lifting, and they do find this is real training now.
Wait a minute, this is actually hard. I don't feel good 24/7. Names will not be mentioned, but certain individuals who say you shouldn't train while you're sore.
Yeah, I disagree.
If that was the case, I think some of us would probably never set foot in the gym.
Right.
It's a fact of life. When the more you do, you're not going to feel great all the time. Period. Full stop. You're not going to feel great all the time. You're not going to feel energized every time you walk into the gym, every time you need to. So deloading with all these programs is an absolute necessity. Periodically backing off, mentally resetting, and I think it's just a fundamental switch in thinking that I think a lot of people who have competed at a high level in any sport, I think they'll understand.
Yeah. But a lot of younger individuals don't. Who are starting out, they're new to this, they don't grasp that. They've not been through this. They don't understand.
Exactly.
People will ask that, if I deload, am I going to lose gains during the deload week? And I'm like, no, not if you were overreaching correctly. You're going to come back bigger and stronger after the deload.
Exactly. That super compensation, your performance went down, it was going down, and then it's going to shoot right back up.
Right.
Yep. And that's again hard thing. I think part of it is so much of weight training and endurance training. It's becoming so much more accessible to a lot more people, especially people as they get older and have other jobs. For a lot of people, that's what they used to do in high school or college. And they were used to working hard then, but they'd also, they could sleep as much as they wanted or not, and they could eat as much as they wanted and drink as much as they wanted, and they still made progress.
Right.
And, suddenly getting out of that in the real world now, and, suddenly they have less time, they have less flexibility, and suddenly it's hard to get this all together and combine that with the feeling of constantly being tired, of constantly being sore and things like that. You got to realize, okay, let's set realistic goals,
And that's what I had to do. I went through that a while back, a number of years ago, back before I got sick and spent all that time in bed. I had actually gone back completely natural. I was on no gear, working a 60-hour work week at my corporate job at the time, and still trying to squeeze in my training. And I have to say, it was definitely different. I still managed to hold on to a 405 bench for a year doing that.
Yeah.
Which had dropped from a 475 when I was on drugs, but
Hey,
But not bad considering I was already past 30 and wasn't on anything, no TRT, nothing, and
Yeah.
working a 60-hour work week, I was happy to hold on to a 550 squat and a 400 bench.
Yeah.
I could only squeeze in like 45 minutes into the gym. You work a 12-hour shift, and it's like, well, I've got to sleep and eat and have a social life, and so I could squeeze in about 45 minutes to train, so I had to make it count, and I was sore all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing too. Is there have been various points in my life when trying to do all this when I was working very long weeks, and you really learn to break down those fundamental the what's important in my training.
Yeah, and that taught me that, because like I've got 45 minutes, that's all I can squeeze in, and I have to work a 12-hour shift tomorrow. And so what do I need to do versus, what can I do? I think I can get away with, what'll be fun. So, no, what do I actually need to do to hold on to some size and strength?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. You learn a lot more of that when you're put in that situation. And again, like you said, the college kids, oftentimes they have a lot of free time.
Yeah.
Unless they work a part-time job also.
Yeah. But they can get away with anything.
True. They don't need as much sleep. And, they can still get away with that Friday night binge drinking.
Yeah, exactly. And go out and run 20 miles the next day and still somehow feel phenomenal.
So speaking of that, we should talk about alcohol for just a little bit in this.
Sure.
Because I know that you homebrew your own alcohol. Mm-hmm. I've not had homebrewed beer in a very long time myself. I tend to have a little bit of Guinness every now and then. It's basically what I drink when I'm over here. Mm-hmm. They all have it on draft, and it's just brewed not that far away. So.
That's probably the freshest Guinness you'll ever get. Yeah, no, it's home brewing is, God, speaking of time, I haven't had really the time to do it in the last year or so, but, beer, you can argue it's a vice, but, again, as much as I love it, as much as I love, the especially the dark Belgian brews, all your, your heavy doubles, your dark ales.
I like dark beers. I'm not big on light beers.
Oh yeah, I mean,
if I can't drink it with a meal, then it's just not workable for me.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of it comes back to, again, this is something I enjoy. It's part of like it. You don't have to worry about that affecting your gains.
Right.
Hopefully.
Cool. Yeah, and back to that point of, like you said, it doesn't affect your gains, and that's one of the big things you see in this industry. People are afraid that if they drink a little bit of alcohol, that it's just going to magically melt their muscle off. I've had people say, well, I read an article by an expert saying it one night of binge drinking will slow your muscle protein synthesis for 2 weeks, and I'm like, really? Because I've known plenty of college ball players, because again, NFL players and scholarship athletes in my own family, that binge drink every Friday and Saturday night while maintaining their scholarship, while maintaining their 450-pound bench press, and go on to get an NFL contract after binge drinking twice a week for their entire university, other than maybe the playing season.
And I think it all comes together, this basic idea that a lot of people are very concerned about the minutiae, like how much alcohol you're drinking at what time, and is this going to negatively affect this, and if I run after lifting, what's going to happen, and if my protein drops below X number of grams per kilogram of body weight, what's going to happen, and we'll basically tell everybody, look, if you eat enough, if you train your ass off and recover enough, it's sleep enough, exactly. All with recovery, it's amazing what your body's capable of adapting to, and it's amazing what you can do. And you can enjoy what you want to do. You can go out and decide to run a 5K if you want to, even if you're a power lifter, and it's feasible. And after all that's said and done, you can go home and have a couple beers, preferably like a Castile or something along those lines, and not a Bud Light, and you'll enjoy it, and you'll be fine, and you'll progress, and the human body is a pretty remarkable system. So you can throw a lot of stuff into it, and it'll still produce some high quality product, I think. Yeah,
and even then the beer thing is so funny. Guys will say that, because I'll have guys, well, I can't eat enough on the bulk. I'm like, well, throw a beer in with your drink. You're struggling. That's free calories. It's full of all sorts of B vitamins and.
Well, but doesn't ethanol then preferentially, doesn't it, cause insulin spikes? And
then they worry about the insulin spikes. And actually, does ethanol even have much of an insulin response? I know that eventually there are pathways where it becomes glucose eventually, but I don't actually recall if it has an insulin response or not. Based off my own memory, it's been many years since I've had a biochem class.
And this is a whole different topic, but there's this fundamental misunderstanding about insulin that it's strictly related to glucose. Yeah. And insulin, the beta cells in the pancreas, actually, they simply react to too much energy in the cell itself. So whatever the energy form is that's getting into the cell, it'll cause an insulin release. So yeah, technically anything can cause an insulin spike. So
and that's one of something you. That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way because again, I get all of these kids will talk about insulin. I'm like, well, you eat a high protein diet, don't you think that has a pretty big insulin response? We're like,
exactly.
Like, well, it does.
Absolutely.
And that whey protein shake.
Yeah.
I've some data showing that a whey protein shake causes a larger insulin response from the same amount of calories from table sugar.
Which makes sense because the whey is instantly transferred in the bloodstream. It's deaminated. You get a heck of a lot of pyruvate and all these other energy substrates that go straight to those beta cells, crank up their energy levels. They produce a whole bunch of insulin. There you go. I mean, that's just how it works. And again, all loops back to this. Like, let's understand the basics of what's really going on here,
rather than try to micromanage these things that you don't understand. If people want to debate these things and discuss them, then I go, if you don't have a degree in biochemistry, you're not going to be able to discuss that. I've only had 2 semesters of it, and so therefore, for me, I will get lost.
The thing is, even the researchers in that field will get lost.
To the real world, your diet and all the biochemistry to your body as an athlete. It's like, you almost need to have at least a minimum of an undergrad, if not a PhD, to properly apply that. And it's still, we're talking, is it going to make that much difference?
That's the big point right there. That's the big thing right there.
Maybe for someone who's got a multi-million-dollar contract, if they're going to perform well enough to get another $500,000 next year. But for anybody else, it's tit for tat.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Fundamentals, focus on what's important, results will follow.
Right.
Period, stop.
All right, guys, but that's really all the time we have today. And Alex, I want to thank you for coming on Juggernaut Fitness TV. And hopefully we'll have you back. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions about all of this. So maybe if we have you back, we'll answer some of those questions. And let's give everybody a bicep shot before we go. Alex, you got to do a bicep shot too.
Really? I can't remember the last time I did a bicep shot. Yeah. No, see,
nice.
I don't do the bodybuilding thing.
You're the leader of the time, so you're good to go. And guys, go check his site out. I'm going to link Alex's site down below. It's Complete Human Performance, and I will talk to you guys next time.